Picture this. You're coming home to your apartment in a big city late at night. You're tired from your long day and just want to go home, but then you remember that you owed your friend some money and have to go drop it off. So, reluctantly, you drive to your friend's building and walk inside. You take the elevator
Sorry, I'm just trying to get a little closer to you.
Okay. You take the elevator all the way up to the top level of their building, then after what seemed to have been the longest elevator ride ever, you are forced to walk down a dark, long hallway to the room. Finally, you get there, and right before you knock, you realize that the door is unlocked and a crack open. Then you fully open the door and see your friend's dead body, and you're like, oh no, you're dead. But how? Well, I, Sam Shanks, am here to answer that question. Welcome to my Masterworks presentation, Deducting Evidence from a Graphic Crime Scene. You may be wondering, why did I turn to crime? Well, after being tasked with this year-long project, I had a lot of difficulty choosing what I want to research. So I started thinking, what could be something that I'm actually interested in and that I could stay interested in throughout the course of the entire school year. That got me thinking, what is interesting to me? And thinking about what is interesting to me, I thought of TV. What comes to my mind when I think about TV is animated TV shows such as Big Mouth, Archer, and Family Guy, and more stuff along those lines. Then I realized very quickly that I'm not very interested enough in animation to do a year-long project on it. So after deciding not to go with that, I continued to ponder what TV shows I like. Then I remembered that I like a TV show called Brooklyn Nine-Nine. Even though it is not very informative in the topic I chose at all, it still got me onto the topic of police work, which leads me to the next TV show that got me interested in the actual topic, which is Sherlock. The show does give a lot more insight on deducting information from a crime scene, but because it's a non-educational TV show, its focus isn't on the work itself, but the drama of the show. However, because of the dramatic nature of the show, I was actually interested in the show, which made me interested in the topic of deducting information from a crime scene. But there's a problem. Deducting information from a crime scene is a very broad topic, so just out of personal preference, I decided to see what information I could deduct from a very graphic crime scene. Okay. Next, outside, there was a little crime scene that I made. Did anyone see anything, peculiar or anything? Show of hands. Connor.
Caution tape.
Yeah, but, what was inside the crime scene? Lucas.
A body.
Yeah. Anything else? Hannah.
There were splatters of blood and fingerprints.
Yes. Okay. Now, but before anyone should go into a crime scene, there is this. When crime scene analysts go to investigate a crime scene, it is crucial that they wear certain clothing and act in a certain way that avoids contaminating the crime scene. They have to wear a full bodysuit, multiple layers of rubber gloves, eye protection, and a mask. I'm sure at this point we're all very familiar with masks. They do this because they do not want to contaminate the crime scene with their DNA. For example, their hair and skin cells. Their full bodysuit also covers their feet so that they don't make any footprints at the crime scene. Evidence must be kept in a place that it was originally found. This is a must because that evidence could be a clue to what happened in the crime scene and possibly the cause of the victim's death. If the evidence is misplaced or moved from its original spot, that mistake could result in false leads, false theories, and ultimately could end up with a murder walking through. Well, knowing what happened in a crime scene can be crucial information to finding evidence in a crime scene. Some methods to finding out what happened in a crime scene are using the position of the body and bloodstains. Position of the body. The position of the body can tell you a lot about what happened in a crime scene. Similar to how bloodstains can tell you a lot. For example, if there was a murder that occurred in the middle of the night and the victim was stabbed to death in their bedroom, the body's position can tell you a lot about what happened and whether or not the victim saw the murder coming. For example, if the body's in a sleeping position or just in their bed, that can lead to someone to suspect either they didn't see the murder coming or they were just asleep. Now, if there are clear signs that they were in bed, but their cloak is near the doorway, away from the bed, that means they probably saw the murder coming and tried to run away, but failed. Bloodstains. Having knowledge about bloodstains can be very helpful in figuring out what happened in a crime scene. Every crime scene is different, every murder is different, whether it's the location of the murder, the method of the murder, or the time it occurred. In terms of blood stains or spatters, there will always be unique conditions. When analyzing blood patterns, these are usually the questions that the analyst would be answering to the best of their ability. 1, where did the blood come from? 2, what caused the wounds? What direction was the victim wounded? How were the victim and perpetrators positioned? What movements were made after the bloodshed? How many potential perpetrators were present? When blood drops at a 90-degree angle and hits a surface, it will make a circle-like shape like that. This means there's no force behind the surface besides gravity. However, the form can vary depending on the surface. The blood is dripping down on something like wood, it will create a more spiky circle, and if the blood hits the same spot on the circle, the form will most likely change into something like that. Sometimes when blood also hits wood, it will create something called satellite stains. Satellite stains are smaller secondary stains that come from the same drop of blood. Satellite stains can also occur when blood is dripped into blood. Satellite stains are like those things. If a killer has created enough blood in the crime scene, it is possible that the person can leave traces of blood wherever they go throughout the crime scene and outside the crime scene. When the traces are no longer visible to the naked eye, they can later be uncovered with chemicals. This can be a useful clue to what they did after the murder and where they could have gone. Smudges Tracks. When blood drops... using a bloody footprint found at a crime scene, the investigators can try and match it to a suspect's shoe to confirm if the suspect is a killer or if the suspect is innocent. Though this alone may not be enough to convict a suspect, it can help build a case against them. The possibilities of a coincidence are extremely low. If a blood stain appears as a smudge or blood that is spread across the surface, such as like that, is called feathering. Feathering can indicate movement throughout the crime scene. For example, if there was any feathering on the wall next to a body, it could indicate struggle by the victim to get up or escape. If any feathering is found on the floor of a crime scene, it could be the victim being dragged across the room. Analyzing something called flow patterns could be very important to interpreting the movement that happened in a crime scene. A flow pattern is how gravity affects blood. For example, if the victim in a case had blood dripping down the side of their shoulder, it could indicate that the victim received the cut while they were already lying down. Blood spatters are another crucial part of figuring out what happened. In this category, there's an external force on an open source of blood that creates them. The most common cause of blood spatter is bludgeoning. Bludgeoning will create spatter stains shaped differently around the room, depending on where the victim was and where they got bludgeoned. This means the blood stains that are closer to where the open source of blood was struck are more circular, and the ones further away of the location of impact, the blood stains will be warped into oval-like shapes. Blood spatter can also be caused by a gunshot passing through a victim's body. This will create a similar series of stains where the bullet comes out. There also may be blood that comes out the body where the bullet entered. That is called backspatter. Time of death. Determining date and time of death is very often valuable knowledge, and it can be critical in certain situations. Actually, in most situations. The stages of death are the most common way to assess the time of death. Knowing the stages will help investigators figure out the time someone has died. The stages are pallor mortis, rigor mortis, liberal mortis, Pallor mortis. Pallor mortis is the stage where the skin starts to become pale. Pallor mortis doesn't actually have much use when determining the time of death. It happens in the first 15 to 120 minutes of death. That means the stage occurs so rapidly that it is nearly useless unless the person has died within 30 minutes of the body being found and examined. This next stage of death is crucial in figuring out a time of death. When dealing with a brute force murder, livor mortis is how the blood pools. After death. Within the time frame of 12 hours, the blood of a stab wound, gunshot, head trauma, and more will be in a liquid state within that 12 hours. However, after the 12 hours, if you move or shift the body, the blood won't pool in a new spot because it is either coagulated or dried. Rigor mortis is the stiffening of muscles following death. This effect is triggered by a counterintuitive fact. Your body expends energy to relax rather than to contract. As a result, when someone dies, their muscles lack the chemical energy to relax, causing them to contract. Rigor mortis, like algor mortis, is particularly helpful in deciding the time of death. The stiffening of the muscles lasts just 36 hours before the body begins to decompose. The muscles loosen, and then the muscles loosen up again. That leaves a small window of opportunity for the motor to have taken place. Algomotors. Algomotors is a decline in temperature in the body. To measure this, the experts on the scene would need to check the temperature of the body. They use what is to non-experts a conventional way of checking someone's temperature. Instead of using an oral thermometer, experts would use a rectal one. This is because of Rigor motors that they can't use an oral thermometer. So experts choose the next most accurate way of checking someone's temperature, which is through the rectum. Depending on the weather and temperature of the area the body is found in, there is a slow decline in temperature after the person has died. The decline is around minus 1.5 degrees Celsius an hour, starting at the average human body temperature of 37 degrees Celsius. This means you can calculate a rough estimate of when the person has died that is fairly accurate. Using this rough estimate, you could help narrow down suspects, and possibly even ensure that you have the correct person. However, the external factors of the crime scene could lead to false information. Using what is suspected about the events that took place in the crime scene using what I said before is great information to predict whether there could be a fingerprint in the crime scene. Lifting fingerprints is quite simple when working with a smooth surface like a window or most kitchen countertops. However, if a murder occurs outside in a forest, an alley in the downtown area of a big city, lifting a fingerprint can vary in difficulty. On a surface like glass, which is the easiest surface to dust and lift fingerprints off of, the process is quite simple. The tools used for this activity are a brush that looks like a feather and powder. The powder used is titanium dioxide, which illuminates the fingerprints in a white color. Then you'll need to use a special kind of tape that can actually lift the fingerprint. However, when dealing with different motors, there could be windows and sometimes there might not be windows. So if there could be a fingerprint on something like a round doorknob, typically you would not use the same method because it's curved. Unlike a window, a round doorknob won't be translucent, therefore it will have color. Just for the purpose of explaining a different method, this is a lighter color, the doorknob. Instead of using white powder like titanium oxide, you'll use a carbon-based fingerprint powder that is black. Instead of using tape to lift the fingerprint, because the surface is curved, you'll use something called microsil instead. Microsil is a fingerprint lifting tool that alone won't be able to lift a fingerprint without a hardener. Microsil, when mixed with a hardener, will become a paste that is spread across a doorknob, and after around 20 minutes it will dry, and then you can peel it off and it'll have a pretty good fingerprint impression. And not all crime scenes will be indoors and completely dry. Picture a murder crime scene in the back alley of a busy city. The victim of this murder has been stabbed to death and what is left is the murder weapon, a broken beer bottle. However, lifting a fingerprint off this bottle could prove to be more difficult than other times. In this case, it had rained the night before. Fingerprints are made up of 98% water. The rest of the percentages that make up a fingerprint are minerals, amino acids, salts, and lipids. So if it had rained the night before the alley had become a crime scene, then that 98% of the fingerprint would be gone. That sounds pretty hopeless, but there is a way around it. Using a fingerprint detection chemical called molybdenum disulfide, you can detect the non-water parts of a fingerprint. Molybdenum disulfide is in its liquid form for this purpose. You'd still use tape to lift it, although because the surface would be wet, it'll be a lot more difficult to lift. Bloody fingerprints. Fingerprints impressed in blood are commonly found at a crime scene. Bloody fingerprints, as disgusting as they are, they can be extremely important. For example, if there's someone's bloody fingerprint at a crime scene and impressed in the victim's blood, and you can verify that, and it's anyone but the victim's, that fingerprint most likely belongs to the murderer, or at least an accomplice. Lifting bloody fingerprints, just like any other fingerprint, you'll need to enhance it first. To enhance a bloody fingerprint, a chemical called leucocrystal violet is used to do so. Leucocrystal violet alone won't have a reaction with the blood, but mixed in with hydrogen peroxide, it will react with the hemoglobin in the blood and turn it a violet-like color. The importance of fingerprints may not be what you think. In television shows, it is often showed that there's technology that can near instantly match a fingerprint to its owner. But unfortunately, this technology doesn't exist. So instead, they are used as forensic evidence, which is the best kind of evidence. There are many steps to solving a gruesome and bloody murder. It can vary in difficulty, ranging from how much of evidence was found and left behind by the culprit. If no evidence is found at a murder crime scene, you might as well label it as impossible to solve. What is found in a crime scene is essential to any murder case. The evidence can vary in utility to solving a murder case, assault case, and kidnapping case. There could be DNA of the victim, culprit, or even a third party at the crime scene. However, there are methods to figuring out which is which using fingerprint techniques. You can have forensic evidence, which, like I said before, is the best kind of evidence, from using other information like you can get from blood spatters, liver mortis, rigor mortis, algor mortis, pallor mortis, blood dripping patterns, bloody footprints, position of the body, and condition of the body. You can learn an approximate time of death, what events could have taken place in the crime scene, and a reasonable estimate of the victim's cause of death. This information about the crime scene will all be necessary information to solving a murder case. Thank you to everyone who supported me during my time working on Masterworks. Thank you to my external and internal advisors, Scott Harrington and Officer Adam Cayley. I'd also like to thank my family for giving me ideas and helping me stay on track throughout my time working on Masterworks. Specifically, I want to thank my mother, who's not here right now, but I hope she's watching, for busting my bum when things needed to be done. I also want to thank Jen's Drill for helping me edit my work and making sure there were no mistakes in my work. I also want to thank Jen Hendrickson for checking in with me and making sure my work was actually being done. I would also like to thank Officers Chase Smith and Robert Otto for letting me interview them. I also want to thank my dad for helping me find sources and being very supportive in general. And finally, I want to thank everyone here for listening to my presentation.
Excellent job, Mr. Shanks. Have a drink of water. Super informative, and I think there's going to be lots of questions from our detectives in the room. First to your advisors.
Well done, Mr. Shanks. Not easy to talk about crime scene investigation, graphic crime scene, to an audience like this, and also in the presence of police officers, your advisors. So kudos to you, nice work. My question to you, beyond all the research that you did, Sam, and understanding the investigative side of crimes and the forensic side, you did have the opportunity to connect with some specialists, thanks to Constable Cayley here, connected you with some specialists, and Robert's here today, and he'll have a chance to talk to you, but Chase is not here, and I'm just curious if you could maybe give a little bit of background and insight to those Zoom interviews and what it was like for you to speak with experts and maybe provide a little bit more detail about that to the audience.
Well, when I was interviewing them, both of them were very nice to me. I also, when I was interviewing them, they showed me, like, Robert showed me cool stuff. Like, he gave me a tour of his office area, which had all, like, the machines and stuff of forensics. And Chase told me a really cool story about, so pretty gross but cool story about a guy that would drive around killing hitchhikers. Pretty cool, but gross. Yeah, so overall, it was a really cool experience. It's nice also to get an approval from professionals, so that was nice.
All right, well, let me pass the mic over to Constable Cayley first.
Hello. How are you?
Pretty good.
You did good. You don't need to be nervous.
Okay.
Did you, during the interviews and everything else, did you talk to the other police officers about any of the other processes that go through it, any of the interviewing techniques or evidence gathering outside of the forensic side?
Really? Not really.
No, that's fine. This was really good. Some of the forensics pieces or way beyond my understanding, so he actually helped me, and I'll be better for this. Yeah, it was really good. I liked some of the other pieces. It would have been interesting to talk to a coroner as well, because they do some of the post-mortem stuff that we don't necessarily do, but it was good.
Thank you. Just give this a bit of a clean here and pass it over. Thanks, Robert. Go ahead.
Well, thank you very much. I just want to compliment you on your presentation because it's a very tough subject to present. It's very gruesome. You know, you may lose a lot of people in the audience talking about this stuff. So I just want to give you a 10 out of 10 for your presentation. So, good job.
Mr. Shanks, I have a technical question for you. I have never heard of 2 of those 3 mortises.
Oh.
Can you explain again liver mortis and what that might tell you? I know it's about the blood pooling. Can you go into that a bit? Okay, we're going to see it.
Okay. So,
Can you just talk about how that would tell you something in a crime scene?
so, like I said before, it takes time for the blood to coagulate and dry. So, if you go and find a dead body and the blood is still liquid, then the murders happen within a 12-hour span. But if you move the body and it doesn't pool, it means it hasn't been in that 12 hours. So it wasn't recent or anything. You can use the other ones to figure out the same thing too.
Yeah, I didn't know that. Quite interesting. It is time for questions from the audience, and so can I please have Cole, Vera, Ben, and Hannah come on up?
That was very good. My question is, what is the most common way that people are murdered?
Really, stabbings? That's yeah.
Well done, Mr. Shanks. My question for you is, what would be some evidence in a crime scene where the murderer had poisoned the victim?
To research that part of murdering, but probably I don't actually know. I'm gonna guess stress around I don't actually know.
So did you look into poisoning?
No, I didn't.
Okay. Yeah, I'm sure with different poisons you're going to have much different evidence.
I have 2 questions. So one of the questions is, for your external advisors, do you have a murderer in one of the advisors as a what? What they do?
Did you interview any murderers? I guess was the first question.
I watched a few videos, but no.
Of murderers and then
Yeah, the creepy ones.
Great presentation. What did you find most surprising way to kill?
Wait. No.
Any surprises, Sam, or did you kind of know most of them already?
Well, that was kind of way of killing is crazy, but maybe killing someone with a spoon.
Good job, Mr. Shanks.
I have a quick question. Do you think that maybe you will look into this as a career path in the future? Maybe police work or forensic analysis?
mean, it is pretty interesting, but it seems like a lot of work.
Okay. But interesting. Okay, Adrian and Charlotte and Connor and Malcolm. Come on up.
Good job, I have a question for you.
Okay?
Yeah, I was just saying what I said. Have you seen like crime scene like that in person before?
No,
Yeah.
I have not.
Great job, Mr. Shanks. I have the opposite question of Andrea. Now that you know about how murders are solved, do you think you'll go into a life of crime? Murder now?
We'll see how life treats me.
See how high school goes.
Yeah.
What got you interested in crime scenes?
Well, I mean, watching Sherlock pretty much did the whole thing. So, that.
I think it's pretty great that Brooklyn Nine-Nine has inspired you and also Mr. Rand and their Masterworks project.
Bloody good presentation, Mr. Shanks. Sorry, I couldn't help the little pun there. Mr. Shanks, you talked about the difficulty in gathering kind of information. It sounds extremely complex, time-consuming, and challenging. Do you know how often actual actionable information is taken from a crime scene? Is it like half the time that they get something useful, or all the time, or?
Depends on how smart the murderer was. If they were pretty stupid, then you can find a lot of stuff, but if they were smart, maybe you won't find a lot of stuff. So, it depends.
Yeah, I see. Great, thank you.
Shank family, any questions from you? Detective Shanks?
I want to know how do you think this is going to change the way you watch TV from here on in? Do you think that they tell a lot of BS in the TV shows? They do, so you're going to be able to pick that out from now on? So more discerning viewers.
Yeah.
Okay, that's all.
Okay, for the next round of questions, put your hands up if you want.
Great job, Mr. Shanks. That was really interesting. So my question, for no particular reason, is what advice would you give to a murderer who is looking to commit a murder but give away the least amount of information to a person investigating the scene?
Wear a lot of layers.
To the mic sound.
Oh. Wear a lot of layers.
Well, can you say that again, please?
Wear a lot of layers. Yeah, like maybe a forensic suit.
Amazing job, Mr. Shanks. And after this presentation, how do you think it will affect your Warzone gameplay?
Well, I will be much more effective at killing people.
Well done, Mr. Shanks. My question is, do you know what percentage of murders are solved or left unsolved?
I actually don't know that percentage. I should probably put that in here, but I didn't.
We could ask one of the people.
Yeah, next person in the room.
Yeah.
Any idea about the... So you're in good company, Sam.
Okay.
Or Robert, any... No?
We work on both and we don't really look a lot.
Nice.
Fantastic job, Mr. Shanks. At what point does the forensic team come in and replace the police officer's work?
As soon as possible, I guess. I think they come in, I believe they come in first and then they let their detectives have a shot at it.
Amazing job. My presentation was very informational. Yeah. But I was just wondering, what was the most surprising thing you found while you were doing Masterworks research?
think it was in this where I didn't know that it took energy to more energy to relax than to contract my muscles. That was pretty interesting.
Great job, Mr. Shanks. I was just wondering, how do you like what's in the murderer's mind? Like, how can you stop them from actually killing people?
Sometimes you can't, but sometimes you can, give them help if they're seeking, I don't know, friends?
Mr. Shanks, I feel like you've enlightened us on all of the ways to be able to solve a murder, and it's interesting if people were watching this, and this goes off of the last question, whether they would then, if you had those intentions in mind, and would you be able to not get caught because we have been able to see all of the ways that you can cover up the evidence? So, I think that's I'm not sure in a good way for those of murderers intent, but I think it's really interesting my work, and Adrian would like to say something.
Just create, can you meet me right up there?
Okay, so this is the end of question and answer period. You're going to be speaking to your advisor after this to make sure you've covered everything that you need to, and they'll be talking to me and we'll make an announcement at 11. At 11 o'clock, you